Hi, this is Ofoy Murray, the digital reader, and I've never really talked about it, but today I thought I would talk about why I don't use Kindle e-readers as my primary e-readers and why I left them. So up until about 2 years ago, Kindle was my e-reader. I had them for years, loved them, rocked them, read tons of books on them. But a couple things happened about 2 years ago that basically turned me off Kindle. I kind of found a workaround, but I guess let me start my story with 2 years ago, I had the perfect media viewing world. On my iPad, I used the Comixology app to look at my comic books. On the Kindle, I used that to read my books. And on my phone is where I had the Audible app where I listened to my audiobooks. Incredibly happy. On my Kindle, what I did is, on Kindle, there are basically two main options to sort your content. The first and the most basic option is to just filter. You can basically show all books, you can show all documents, and Kindle calls documents basically anything that you use, that you put on your Kindle using Send to Kindle. So if you use Send to Kindle to put something on your Kindle, then they're going to call that a document. So you can sort that, and you can sort stuff that's read and unread. So you could basically show all of your books that you read or all of the books that you didn't read. It's basic. The other organizing option on the Kindle is called collections. And collections are basically folders that you create to move content into. You name the folders whatever you want, and you can move your content into them. And when you choose the collections option, what happens is the folders that you create will show, and then there will be a folder called uncollected. And anything that you haven't specifically moved into a folder, if you purchase it on Kindle, it'll move into the uncollected folder. So what I did at the time on my Kindle is, at the time I had hundreds of books. So I mentioned how when you're in collections, if you haven't organized the book, it'll just go into a collection or folder that they call uncollected. So what I did is I created a folder called Not Read, I created a folder called Read, and I created a folder called Reading. So whenever I would buy a book and it would go into uncollected, I would move it to Not Read. And then if it was, I was going to be reading it, and usually I don't read more than one book at a time, but I like to kind of put the next 4 or 5 books that I'm going to read, and I would put those in reading. And then once I finished the book, then I would put it into read. Perfect, super happy. That's how everything worked. And then Amazon changed a couple things. The first big issue I had is that Amazon basically got rid of the Comixology app, and they dumped all of your comics into the Kindle app. And of course, they put them all, since I was using collections at the time, they put them all in the uncollected folder. So I went from having tight organization of my collections or folders to going onto my Kindle one day, and there's 150 uncollected books. So what I did is I then created 3 more collections or folders. I created comic books I haven't read, comic books I'm reading, and comic books that I already read. So I created collections for that. So I wasn't terribly happy with that experience, but fine. Then what Kindle did is, with the newest Kindle Paperwhites, they then did the same thing with audiobooks. So one day, when I got my new Kindle Paperwhite, I'm in there one day and I'm like, huh? And now I have another 150 or so things in the uncollected folder. And of course, I have to sort those. And so I create 3 more folders. I create not read, reading, and read, and move them into those folders. The big pain began when the collections that I created, they've never really been 100% accurate as far as the collections that you create on your Kindle also showing on your PC app or your Mac OS program on your computer, and also showing on tablets. It's never been 100% accurate, but it was good enough that I could live with it. But I did notice that on my Kindle app, the collections I created didn't sync cleanly with the apps that were on my Kindle device, and also on my the app on my Mac. I noticed that they didn't sync cleanly, and that began to be a pain point. When it was just 3 collections, it worked pretty good. But now that I had 9 different collections I'm keeping track of all this stuff in, it really started to become a pain. I guess the first question is, well, what could Kindle have done? For me, what I really wish Kindle had done is really made a change to their interface on their Kindle devices, where they had 3 tabs. They had a tab for books, and you could do everything in books. They had a tab for comics, you could do everything in your comics, and they had a tab for audiobooks, and you could do everything in your audiobooks. And you could use a tab view if you chose to, or you could use a non-tab view and it would be the way it is. Because honestly, if you don't have a huge library, then there's no real reason for 3 tabs to move between content. But that was what I would have liked. What I would have also liked is I would have liked them to improve collections a bit, so that you could pre-sort collections, so that you could create a collection or folder and basically create criteria for stuff to automatically populate that folder. So I could create a folder and I could say, okay, in this folder, just put books. In this folder, automatically put all the audio content. At least if that happened, that would have helped a little bit. So at this point, I'm managing all those things and I'm still purchasing content, and it just started to become unwieldy. And I just was like, I just want to use my Kindle for books. I don't want to have to resort everything and move everything around whenever I buy a comic or whenever I buy an audiobook. And what also happened is, I can't explain now, but every now and then when there would be a system update, what would happen is there would be a system update and my collections would be all messed up and I'd have to resort everything all over again. So finally, I just gave up. And what I started to do is I took all of the books that I currently had purchased on my Kindle and all of the comics, and I moved them to Calibre, pulled off the DRM, and once I did that, I permanently deleted them from my Kindle. Once I permanently deleted them from my Kindle, then what I began to do is I would filter for documents. And remember, documents only shows the stuff that you send to Kindle for. It doesn't show anything else. So I would filter for documents, and then I would take a book I bought from Kindle, legitimately of course, that I had pulled the DRM from, and I would sideload it or use send to Kindle to send it onto the Kindle, and I would read it that way. And luckily, I had found an app that I need to do a dedicated video on because I love this app so much. But I found an app called Bookshelf, and I basically what I did is I began to do all of the recording of what I read, how I read, when I read it, how long it took me to read. I began to do all of that on Bookshelf. So what I would do is I would just use send to Kindle to send a Kindle book I purchased onto the Kindle, sort by documents, and then the only thing I saw when I would go onto my Kindle would be the books that I put there myself. And of course, you'll see the Kindle bookstore, but that's a minor thing. So that's what I started to do. And then color e-readers came out, and in looking around and looking at the color e-readers, that's when I discovered the Pocketbook e-reader. And in looking at reviews, even though there's not a ton of reviews that go over that, I mean mine does, but not a ton. But in looking at some of the reviews, I discovered the Pocketbook Cloud. And the Pocketbook Cloud was just the perfect option for me, where basically you pick some books you want to read, you put them in the Pocketbook Cloud, and since I was now using Bookshelf, it was just I put them in the Pocketbook Cloud, I read those books, I keep track of them in Pocketbook Cloud, and then once I've read all those books, I just delete them from Pocketbook Cloud, and everything I read and the activity and how long it took for me to read it is all stored in my Bookshelf app. So that's why currently I don't use Kindle. Now I'm doing this video because they have new Kindles coming out. I'm curious to see their interface, to see if I'm thinking about moving back to Kindle. I think that I would move back to Kindle if I saw something in the interface new or updated, or if I use Kindle, if I looked at the Kindle app and it basically had something to draw me back. One thing I really miss about the Kindle experience, and I mean specifically Kindle devices, is the snappiness of the interfaces on the Kindle devices and the seamlessness of synchronization across everything. A Pocketbook has that, so I guess I won't give them a ding for that, but I do kind of miss that. And I'm not a button person, I'm a screen tap person, so I do just like the very simple basic form factor of the Kindle Paperwhite and the Kindles, which are just basically a square that you read on rather than something that wants to include buttons, mainly because whenever you include buttons, you increase the size of the device, and I feel like I want as much screen as I want to device ratio. And if you can take off the buttons, you can make a bigger screen in a smaller device. So right now, I'm still rocking Bookshelf. I probably am going to view the reviews for the Kindle Colorsoft and see if I get tempted and decide what I want to do then. And of course, if I do something, I'll make a video about it. This is Afoy Murray, the digital reader, and keep reading.